Welcome, everyone. The board met in the middle school room 206 in executive session for the purpose of discussing, among other things, the employment history of a particular individual. So we're just going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All right. Any opposed? No? Great. The next meeting of the Haldane Board of Education is scheduled for Tuesday, February 28th, 7 p.m. right here in the middle school, high school library for a workshop meeting. The workshop topic for that evening is going to be special education detail report, budget topic, special education. Dr. Kashian, who is here this evening, will be joining us then as well. It is that time again. Board of Education trustee candidate petitions are available in the district office or by contacting the district clerk, Megan Shields. Petitions and the first campaign expenditure statement are due no later than 5 p.m. on Monday, April 17th. I believe there is one opening on the board this year. And if, as is always the case, if you're thinking about it, if you're considering about what it is to serve on the board at any time, you can, I'm sure all the board members here would be happy to talk to anybody about that. And if you'd like to recommend someone or put someone forward, push them forward, by all means do, and we'll speak to them as well. I know that Dr. Benante will likely speak to some of the issues that we had over the weekend in the high school. But in advance of that, I just want to thank Dr. Benante, Principal Sniffen, the maintenance staff, and everybody who was here over the weekend, making sure that the kids could get back here on Monday after an HVAC water issue that occurred. So, Dr. Benante.
Yeah, we weren't the only ones, but not a group you want to be a part of, I guess. So as Sean mentioned, we did have an issue with a coil in one of the ventilation units in the attic, I'll say, of the high school. That unfortunately ruptured, caused a lot of water to enter the second floor of our building, which impacted 2 classrooms in the lobby area upstairs and then filtered down through some way, shape, or form into the lobby area downstairs and impacted primarily one classroom downstairs. Actually, one classroom was the one that probably had the most damage. Our team was great. One, just in identifying the issue, Mr. Lissakatis was on campus doing his regular check and readily identified it and was able to address the water issue with the right person to address it. Thankfully, we immediately mobilized several members of our custodial team who began the initial cleanup and then also contacted and contracted with an environmental cleanup group who's still here. They're here now, finishing up some of the detail work, and we'll be here throughout the week doing that. And this is what we have insurance for. So I'll be sure to provide the board once the work is finalized with an estimate in terms of the cost. That being said, it'll be submitted through our insurance company, and I expect that they'll cover the majority of it. So that will come. And again, thanks to everybody who was a part or assisting with the cleanup. And also just want to thank the high school staff and student body. They came in on Monday and obviously knowing that, I'd say with some trepidation, because they received a message about what had occurred, what's the school going to look like. And while it looked largely great considering the work that had been done to clean up, not everything's exactly as it was, and I would say as it should be, but they're working around it. And what's important to us is that the building's safe, and the building, and we were able to ensure that Sunday. But that being said, we want to return it to its usual condition as soon as possible, and we expect the majority of the work to be completed by Friday. So. One other note I just wanted to speak to, it's been a few weeks since we met. We had the annual Battle of the Tunnel game soon after we last met, and both the girls played at Beacon High School, and our boys had a home game here. Got to go to both games, great turnout from the Haldane community, both going up to Beacon and certainly at our home game Friday night. And I think both groups of kids played real competitive matches. It was great at the girls' game. during halftime, the CYO teams got to play against each other during halftime. The girls, yep. So you get to see the kids in their Loretto jerseys, both in attendance but also playing at halftime, which I think is great. And a lot of community support for that as well. And then a lot of those kids were back on Friday night, obviously, to watch the game, which was a very exciting game. And we fell just short in the girls' game, but we'll be back next year. And in the boys' game, it was a great game. We came away the victors. Really could have gone either way. I did want to acknowledge not only our staff, but the Beacon High School staff as well, their athletic department, their coaches. It was a great atmosphere for both communities. And we do a lot of planning as it relates to those events. You want to see everything go well and go smoothly, and it did. And that's a credit to both schools and the efforts that were made by part of all the folks who come together and to put such events on for our kids. And I think it's really beginning. I know it's been a little bit more established for the boys than it was for the girls, but the girls are now part of the battle of the tunnel, if you will. It's becoming a real just special event for our kids and obviously for Beacon's kids as well, a game they can look forward to each year and they can reflect upon. It's probably one of the larger crowds they're going to play, or one of the more excited crowds they're going to play in front of on both ends, and I think it's really turned into a special event. And I just want to note one of our student athletes, Matteo Cervone, who scored his 1,000th point in the Battle of the Tunnel game, and that's a really significant milestone for a high school basketball player. We have a banner in our gym, actually, that of all the girls and boys players that have scored or reached that milestone. Matteo will now be a part of that. And Matteo couldn't embody the spirit of what it means to be a student athlete on campus. He was so gracious, not only with his family, but after the game, so many kids wanted to get their picture taken with him. He took a picture with everybody. I got a picture with Matteo. I mean, everybody wanted to have their picture taken with Matteo, and he was there, all smiles. There's a great photo of him and his mom and dad and Julia in the PCNR this week, and but just a really good person of strong character, and he represents the best of Haldane, that's for sure, both on the basketball court and in his as a student here every day on campus. That concludes my remarks, unless there's any questions about pipes, coils, basketball. I'm happy to answer them.
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Ready to move on?
We'll transition now to our next budget presentation. And I just want to remind the board that we're on a bit of a shortened timeline this year for budget. So presenting curriculum and instruction, some overview, some guiding thoughts this evening. And Catherine may have some things that she wishes to share or comment on, depending on your questions as well. Next budget meeting, Regina will be presenting on special education, but we'll also be making the administrative recommendation for the budget at our next meeting as well. And that's just to keep us in sync with some of the timelines and give the board ample opportunity to continue to deliberate on what the administration has recommended and provide us with continued feedback if there's any adjustments we need to make before the board formally adopts the budget to present to the community. I'm going to actually come to the podium if that's okay. Megan, do I have a click right there?
Would you like me to?
You can do it, actually. Thanks,
Great.
Megan. Okay, we can just start with the agenda, Megan, if that's okay. So for this evening, we're going to speak a little while around some guiding thoughts that I framed as considerations for budget development and curriculum and instruction. I've, in the past, provided an overview on class sizes. I'll do the same tonight. An overview of the professional learning and curriculum development budget will be provided. Since we last met, the governor has released her executive proposal, so there's things in there that I just want to speak to and make sure the board is aware of that will continue to influence our budget development over the next month. We have calculated the tax levy limit, so we would like you to be familiar with that now moving forward. It's based on information we have now, and some final thoughts. So Megan, we can go right into this. So as we think about the curriculum and instruction aspects of budget development, and instruction and the instructional lines comprise the largest portion of our budget. So that's including all salaries on the teaching end of things for us. So we want to emphasize our continued work around coherence planning, content-specific professional learning. And just two examples of that, we started some work in elementary literacy this year with a particular consultant that we'd like to continue into next year. We, I think as Josh has presented and Christina's alluded to, we're going to adopt a new math textbook by the end of the year, or at least we'll have a recommendation available to the board. There's some professional support that we want to make sure we have in place as we transition to that resource next school year. We're really hearing from our staff a desire to expand professional learning offerings for all staff next year. That was reflected in the results of our school climate survey, but I also meet with staff periodically throughout the year. I just had 2 of those meetings in January, and that came up as a significant theme in that conversation. We're not close to our regional BOCES, which makes it difficult for our staff to access offerings that are there. They do, but it's not. It's difficult for some of them to do so, especially considering when those offerings are after school down in Yorktown, and we may have staff members that are heading home, going north or west from here. We have some open positions, again, just transitioning to the instruction end. We want to make sure we're recruiting and hiring for those open positions with an emphasis on our core values as a school district. I made note our federal funding for the interventionist position is coming to an end. That was federal stimulus money that came to the district. We want to maintain that position at the elementary school level, so we have to incorporate that into our planning. And as we'll speak, Haldane has always offered very competitive class sizes. We do seek to realize efficiencies wherever possible, but we know that those competitive class sizes support an important connection between our kids and our staff that is an important component of our program. So we want to maintain that to the extent that we can as we go into budget development. Megan? Just want to provide an overview of what our class sizes look like at the elementary level. So I'll give you a second just to scan this overview. You'll note we have a relatively small cohort of students in 5th grade that are scheduled now to go up to 6th grade. So they're currently spread across 2 sections. They're going into a teaming model at 6th grade. So that's where I said we want to maintain our competitive class sizes, but realize efficiencies wherever we can. So maybe there's an opportunity there there is an opportunity there to rethink how we're structuring 5th and 6th grade next year. Now, at the middle and high school level, I just pull out particular sections. Obviously, our programs are much more comprehensive than this, but this is just to give you a broad overview of what the class sizes look like in each of those 2 schools. We do have class sections that are a bit higher. We have class sections that may be lower, again, across both schools. But this gives you a pretty good idea of what they look like on average in our schools. Megan, you can transition to the high school. And I think there's one more here. So our English offerings are more extensive, so let's see quite a few sections here. I did not include it in this presentation, but I've showed you in the past. When we look across our region, there's 18 school districts in the PNW region that serve as a good benchmark for us. When we look at these data in comparison to those districts, our class sizes generally reflect that we're in the top 3 in terms of lowest class sizes or student faculty ratio. And we think that's a good thing. That's an important part of our program. Okay, Megan. So we look at professional and curriculum development. This gives you a sense of what our spending was or has been over the past 3 years, or previous 3 years, and what we've budgeted for this school year. This serves as a basis of our planning now going into next school year. You can see where we've budgeted in 22-23, the beginnings of trying to look more internally of expanding our professional learning opportunities here at Haldane. Again, being cognizant of some of that staff feedback we've heard recently. We've heard that in the past as well. So this is where the contractual expenses for literacy and intervention training, you'll see we added a significant amount of funding for that this school year. That's our work with Megan Hargrave at the elementary level, as well as our professional development, learning focused supervision and support. That was a designation for our administrators for this school year as well, centering us around discussions related to what is effective practice, what does that look like in our classrooms. And our budget line, our total budget line over the years has really ranged here. You can see from 1920, there's a significant amount of BOCES spending there. Some of this came through contracting for curriculum and instruction support. We did not have that position. We were contracting with BOCES to have someone come in and provide leadership support in that area. If I were to go back further, which we don't in this presentation, but you would have seen our spending range somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 annually. We were carrying the New Tech Network contract for a period of time. That was a significant contract that was reflected in our budget in previous years. So again, this will remain an area of focus in our planning over the next few weeks. I wouldn't expect to make dramatic enhancements, but just continued enhancements that allow us to provide options locally for our faculty and staff in professional learning. Okay, Megan. Again, as we shift to the program end now, teaching in the regular school, special services program, related service support, all the way on down, including employee benefits. This comprises the bulk of our budget each year. If you think of our budget's around $27 million, $20 million of that is really committed to our personnel who are working with our kids in some way, shape, or form throughout the course of the school day. So you can see what our actual spending has been here over the years, what we budgeted for this school year, and where we are projected to be. Again, it's just a projection there. I do want to speak to just two figures here where maybe you would note some discrepancies. Under pupil transportation, you'll see our budget was around $1.1 million. We're coming in projected just under $1 million. That could be attributed to unfilled positions in transportation. We have had difficulty finding drivers. Now, that'll show up in another line under transportation budget because we're paying overtime for to cover some of those runs. So it's not as if we're saving money there. I just want to be upfront about that because we are incurring some significant overtime costs for those positions that are unfilled because we still have to cover the runs, whether it be extracurriculars, athletics, or runs during the regular school day.
Just a question while you're at the slide. Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
What all goes under instructional media?
Library media services, salaries included in that.
Okay. Great, thanks.
Technology as well.
I might as well piggyback if
Sure.
On the pupil transportation, does that include students not going to Haldane?
It does, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Out of district runs, yes.
Okay.
One other note I just wanted to make was under employee benefits. So we have some interim support in place. We don't pay the benefits for those employees. So while we desire to have full-time, well, our interims are full-time, but probationary or tenure individuals in those positions where we have interims in place. These may be retirees. These are retirees who are supporting us. So we don't pay the benefits for those particular employees.
Hey, just quick question. While we're on the related employee benefits line, I noticed that there was a pretty significant budgeted growth. We're coming in a little bit under it, probably due to the reason that you just outlined, Phil. But is that primarily because of TRS?
It was the employee benefits and an 8% increase in health insurance last year.
Okay.
On the premium? Through the consortium, right.
So there were two pieces of the governor's executive proposal that I just wanted to speak to. Now, there's a lot to the governor's executive proposal, but again, for this evening, I wanted to speak to. It did include the final phase-in of our full foundation aid, which is great. We were expecting that. The governor has included that in her proposal. There is a set-aside within that. So we're going to show you what this looks like on the next slide, but there's a $100,000 foundation aid set aside for high impact tutoring services in grades 3 through 8. And we see this at times when districts are scheduled, maybe there's a particular budget increase or an increase in state aid, certain set asides that are designated for use in a very particular way. Personally, I don't love them. I'd like to have the flexibility, if you will, to decide where that money is best directed in conversation with you and with our staff. But at times this occurs. Now, we'll put this money to good use, but I do think from a lobbying perspective, I meet with our assemblywoman, I think this Friday, through a WIPSPA piece. These are areas where I would point to say, if there's any opportunity as the legislature is now working through the budget development process for flexibility in something like this, that would be helpful. I understand where this is coming from, but that being said, we may benefit from using this money in a different way to support students than how the set-aside is designated. Another piece, there's an increase in our UPK funding now, as I've shared with the board, and I'm not exactly sure yet, still working on this, how this funding is come to us. So typically your UPK funding comes at a per pupil cost. There's a designation, a certain number of seats the New York State has designated for you to have to establish a universal pre-K program, and then a value attached to each of those seats. And you can either run your own program or you can contract with another agency, and you can provide that level of funding to that agency based on the number of seats that they make available to you. So we've seen an increase in this figure, but I'm not sure if this is an increase in the number of seats or if it's an increase to the seats we already have, which would be better. Because we think the number of seats we've been designated is actually an appropriate amount. The issue we have is the reimbursement rate the state provides of $5,000 is far less than the typical cost of pre-K for many of our local providers. So it's difficult for two reasons. One, that they would essentially, through their good grace, have to be offering us a seat at a reduced cost when they probably can fill that seat at full cost from a family locally. That's potentially one issue. The other is with respect to the nature of the seats that are available in our community. A lot of our programs are full. So even if we had an entity that wanted to contract with us, many don't have the seats available to offer us. So it's good to see increases in pre-K. Pre-K is great. I think over time, if we were to have the space, we would just run our own program here. That would be the best way to approach this. That being said, we're still investigating other opportunities that may be available to us for next school year to utilize the funding. We want to use it.
My question is about what's the scheduling as far as the state's mandate for us providing this for students? Like, are we in one way or another responsible for this, even if we don't have access to it? Or
there's an expectation that we would use it. There's no requirement. Okay. So I've received, just as an example, probably received more calls from SED than I ever have in my 10 years of district office leadership on UPK, just quite frankly, in a good way, offering support. How can we help? Are you familiar with the resources that we have available, which can be everything from, we have draft RFPs that you can work off of, templates to work off when you're initially posting that you have the program available. So SED has been really helpful in trying to help us lift this program off the ground. But this is an issue that seems to be impacting our region in particular. We generally are in a wealthier region of New York State where pre-K costs and demand for pre-K is pretty high, and there's just not a lot of seats available. that school districts have been able to access, in particular those who don't have the ability or the space to run their own program. So it's a common topic among my superintendents groups, and what we've advocated for through the Superintendent's Council is for increase in funding, so we could make the per seat cost or reimbursement rate higher, where maybe now a local provider would see good reason to reserve seats for Haldane, and because the reimbursement rate would be more consistent with what they would charge anyway.
My second question is about transportation. Should we set up with a program that's off campus or even on campus? Are we obliged to provide the transportation for those students to the program? And is that an other cost that the state helps us with, or something that we should
The state
think
does
about?
not provide us with the cost. I believe we have a responsibility to account for transportation. I think there's some caveats to that, Sean, that I'd just have to get back to you on. I don't want to misspeak this evening.
Just one thing you want to keep in mind, Sean, in New York, we call it universal pre-K, but it's nowhere near universal. I think Vermont has actual universal pre-K where we have a word,
Yes.
but we don't really do it. I mean, there are places that have been able to do it, but it's unfortunate.
Can I ask a question about the foundation aid?
Yeah.
Set aside rate. What, how narrow are the parameters for what you can use that for? In terms
The
of
set aside?
the high impact tutoring.
Yeah,
whatever
so
that
we're not
means.
sure. And this is sometimes what happens in this period of time between the executive budget proposal and whatever the legislature chooses to adopt, is this is just a call out in the proposal. It was defined in it, but I would say that there's always a set of accompanying regulations that we need to see in order to really guide our program. And I'll just, if I can,
Excuse me, Sean, can you bring the mic towards you?
So the call out, the establishment of high impact tutoring programs for the 23-24 school year. Districts must use these funds to provide small group or individual tutoring to students in grades 3 through 8 with a focus on reading and math. So some things kind of left for interpretation there. And over the next couple of months, as we begin not just continue with budget development, but come to understand a little bit more of what the intention of this set aside is and what it looks like, if there's any adjustments that are going to be made, or if there's rooms for adjustments to be made, maybe to the grade spans that are listed here. That's very specific, 3 to 8. Well, those are the tested grade levels, right? So,
That's so.
got it.
I don't agree.
Those are the, right, the grades most impacted by the pandemic.
You
I
could
would-
say that,
I
yeah.
don't think so.
But I would.
Oh, I think so.
You could argue that, our kindergartners, our first graders, our second graders, even though they may not have yet been in school, also are demonstrating some of the negative outcomes of the pandemic.
Our 11th graders are heavily.
Or your high schoolers. So, so we just would want more flexibility with this than defining it to the 3 through 8 band. Personally, not opposed to small group or individual tutoring. Tutoring has connotations to it. So, what's tutoring? And so all to be worked through over the next couple of months. Just to look at the actual figures next, so you can see here, 22-23 compared to 23-24. So the foundation aid increase is significant. Just going down here, I don't think there was anything else I wanted to call out.
Is that $100,000 in increased foundation aid reflected in that 2023 number?
Correct.
That you have there?
Correct. So when we see at the bottom there, Ezra, the foundation aid increase of $752,000, keep in mind $100,000 of that has already now been designated. For something very specific that may or may not align with our goals for our kids for next school year. So again, those are some of the things that happen when these, the governor certainly has the right to do that, and we'll make good use of it if necessary, but definitely a point of advocacy that we want to take up over the next couple of
And
months.
we do have an interventionist.
We do.
Right.
Well, here's the thing, though. Is this a 100? So yes, and could that qualify? When I tutoring versus intervention. You know, there's some distinctions there that I would make, right? But that may not be the governor's intent. So maybe it fits perfectly with something we're already doing. But with the set aside, does that remain a set aside now in subsequent years? So is it just an increase for one? Is it one-time money, or is it money that's now a core part of our foundation aid? Those are some of the questions that I would have. Because from a planning perspective, did we really receive the full reimbursement of foundation aid? And this is $100,000 that's going to be designated or needs to be designated in such a way in subsequent years? Or did we really receive a $650,000 increase in foundation aid and a one-time $100,000 set aside? I don't know. Those are the types of questions the superintendents ask, you know, over drive ourselves crazy over for a couple weeks here.
3 people in Albany will make that decision.
Yeah, right.
That's what happened.
So that being said, still a favorable picture in comparison to where we've been in years past. This is a significant increase in state aid than we've had in other years, and we'll put it to good use. In addition to this, we're at a point where we can now calculate the tax levy limit. So our allowable tax levy for the upcoming school year will be 1.96%. That is relatively lower than where it has been in previous years. Our allowable growth factor was the CPI increase, so 2% for 2022. If we were to go up to the levy limit, which I would recommend for 2 reasons. One, our levy limit's relatively lower than it has been in previous years. But again, we don't know what this is going to look like in each subsequent year. So if we can levy up to 1.96%, I think we should. It would generate an additional $426,000 in revenue. It's revenue for us, it's tax, it's an expense, we know, for the local homeowner. But that being said, this, combined with the state aid increase, should allow us to address some areas of our program that we would like to enhance looking into next school year.
I'm very surprised by that CPI increase number being only 2% for 2022.
It's capped at 2%. So it's
Capped
higher.
no matter what.
So it's higher, but the highest
Yeah.
we can go is 2% as it's factored into the formula.
Wow.
So CPI was 7.
7. Yeah.
Right. But you have to take the lesser of.
Lesser of 2% or the
Yeah.
actual.
It's one of the devious kind of things around the tax levy limit legislation. So even though
Yeah.
all of our costs are going up 7% or
7%.
more,
Yeah.
we're limited now to that. What is factored in
Yeah.
is only a
You
2%
just said 8% on the healthcare premium.
growth factor. Correct.
Right.
So we'll now look at revenue against expenditure. This is all work that's going to occur over the next couple of weeks as we prepare a recommended budget for you at the end of this month. Our building leaders and department leaders have finalized their budget needs for the upcoming school year, so I'm working with them, particularly our building leaders, through that process over these couple of weeks. And then we will present a recommended budget proposal to you on February 28th. Given the relatively short timeline that we're on this year, I will speak to perhaps some broad areas where we're looking to make investments in to be continued to be refined in that early weeks of March, just so that you're aware. So there's some room there, and I know the board will be good about giving us some of that room, but we may not define every detail related to what's included in the budget for that February 28th meeting. We'll have the broad swaths of it covered, if you will, but there's going to need to still be another couple weeks just to refine certain elements of it, which again, I think the board will be understanding of. Megan, I don't think I have anything beyond this, correct?
Questions?
Other questions?
I mean, I do have a question.
Yep.
Since we're talking about curriculum and instruction for 2023, 2024, I mean, is there inability to, one of the concerns I think that exists in the community is definitely when we talk about enrichment and enrichment opportunities for our students, either after school enrichment or things like that. I don't want to go budget, item by item, but do you see an opportunity here within the budget to at least seek some of those opportunities?
I do. I think we're going to be in a unique situation as compared to previous years where we have quite a few things that I think we would like to do. I think there's going to have to be a good discussion with the board. We can present some of those. They all come at a cost, obviously. Present some of those to the board, and I'm interested in hearing back from the board of these. Which do we feel maybe become priorities? The significant amount of funding with the state aid, the levy helps. The levy increase helps, assuming we want to go to the full amount there. I think we're going to have the opportunity to expand program in some areas. And where we determine to make those program expansions is going to be something we want to make sure we're discussing with you. So whatever those opportunities may be, I'd say let's make sure we're talking about that at our next meeting.
Can you remind me how many teachers we have retiring this year? Off the top of my head, four, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
And we could also go back to that, the current kindergarten class. That's a pretty small class. Is there any room for, thought there on breaking that into 2 sections?
Yeah, so it may not be specifically there, but Ms. Jammin and I have been reviewing the sections that are allocated to the elementary school and whether or not it makes sense, how many sections make at each grade level make the most sense given our student enrollment or cohort numbers at each of those grade levels. So
That's a pretty low, that's the lowest it's been in a while in terms of, last year there was, 11 and 12 in those classes because
Correct.
of the, not every student was in person. But
we're projected to stay right around 40. If just going back to the enrollment study we had done a few years ago, we're projected to be right around 40 for the foreseeable future. And again, it's you could do 2 sections of 20. You can do 3 sections and they'll fall somewhere around 13 or so, 13, 14 kids. We've, in the past, just if you're going to have relatively lower class sizes, try to bias that towards the primary grades more so than the intermediate grades. That's just generally speaking. Every grade at times presents its own unique qualities and attributes. So, there's feelings about where the lower section should be, but again, our class sizes here are very, very healthy. Quite frankly, the concern is really more on the other end, that it gets so low that it's no longer a rife social environment for the kids. I think you can be too low and try to strike a fair balance there by having a class size that's appropriate.
the current 6th grade class had only 2 sections of kindergarten. And that was where are they at right now?
Got it.
54, yeah, they only had 2 sections, just for the record.
Mm-hmm.
And again, on that, you said that because this year's 4th grade class is so large, it's likely that the next 5th grade will switch.
So it's not, if you wouldn't mind, thank you, Megan.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science, right? That 4th grade's going up to 5th. We're not going to have 2 classes of 30. So we just wouldn't feel good about that, although I'll make a note, my first year teaching, I had 31. But I wouldn't wish it upon anyone.
No.
So yeah, that's, these are the readjustments that we talk through around this time of the year.
And I think also one of the strengths that we have, remember, we're a marketing force, basically you have the marketability as a public school to basically offer in many of these classes private school numbers, and this, you sit here and Haldane basically functions, for lack of a better word, a premier private school, and it's sitting right here and overlooking the river. It's a gem. And part of that is relatively, actually not even relatively low. These are low class sizes,
Yeah, I think I've maybe said this in the past, and I could be misremembering, but Peter would have been, in the early elementary grades, so 20 years ago, it's not ancient history. He always had more than 20 kids in a class.
Yeah.
It was like 22, 23. It hasn't always been this small.
And have we made the
That's my memory.
determination yet as to which grade levels will have ICT, or will all the
Oh, I
grade
had
levels
that
have
same question,
ICT?
yeah.
No, I don't know if it's included or if we can add, we could perhaps think about that in preparation for Regina's budget presentation, but we usually wait for the further along, and Regina, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the annual review process to go through before we start designating what ICT looks like or the scope of that program.
Official designations, but we do attempt to project, and I think that, you know, for example, there happens to be one grade where more of the students are requiring special class for ELA, a little bit more intensive based on those needs. So we're looking at that class to say, hey, you know what, this might not be an ICT cluster for ELA, this might actually be a special class cluster. But we're really looking at the projected needs of all of the grade by grade. But it can be tricky sometimes if you have 2 children in a class and you're running an ICT model, you know, there's some things to be weighed sometimes.
Thank you. Those are my
I
questions.
just had one comment to make about the professional development. Given that was something that the staff really spoke to in terms of what they want, and we realize how important it is, like we know how important it is. I think it's an important investment. I also just wanted to note, like, it's just weird, even if this went back further, like, I don't really know how useful it is for us to compare what is in this budget or what we want to do to what's happened in the past few years, because the 2 years previous, it was COVID. And so, like, there weren't the same kind of PD opportunities. And you mentioned in 20 that included to some extent, I thought you said Judy Barbera?
Yep, so under
For
BOCE's
support,
professional
right?
development, that's
Right,
where
right,
that,
right.
it
And
comes
then-
in on that line.
And then before that, it was the New Tech Network, which was, controversial. I mean, a lot of people didn't think that was the best way to spend that kind of money. So that being said, like, yes, we always want to look and see, well, what's been spent in previous years and how does this year's budget and what we're going to budget for the future compare to that. But my point is, though, they're actually not really very useful. They're not very useful comparisons. And I think what that really needs to come out of is, like, what's in the professional development plan that, Josh spoke about recently, and what are the opportunities that the district and teachers believe are going to be most beneficial for them and for kids,
Right.
So anyway, it's just it's been weird how it's
Yeah,
been
it's very
spent in the past few years.
Appreciate that.
I think we're good. All right. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to communication from the public. The Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on any special presentations or active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, please sign in, state your name for the record. Please keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. Disparaging remarks and discussion of district personnel is strongly discouraged. Although we do not engage in dialogue, we are listening. Please leave your contact information with our district clerk, Megan Shields, for prompt follow-up from the board president or superintendent. Mr. Asher, would you like, no question? Okay, great. You guys are doing just fine. Okay, thank you so much. I hope you take note of that, please, Ms. Shields. Sign in, we'll take it, I'll take it. All right, moving on to information reports. Copies of the financial reports are included in the agenda. These are just for our review. I don't know if anybody has any comment on them. I don't think so. No action necessary. Moving on to consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, these are minutes from our January 3rd Board of Education workshop meeting. Any discussion? No? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? No? Lovely. Moving on to committee minutes. These are the Tech Committee minutes from December 5th and Policy Committee minutes. The Tech Committee minutes include a reference to our Razor, the new security system, as well as the two-factor authentication, which is going throughout the district with our educators.
Raptor.
The Raptor, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and it's going well. Just
Great.
want to make note.
I think it's so great that we have, I mean, that is something actually that Dr. Bowers brought up years ago, and I think it's great that we've been able to get it implemented. I think it's fantastic.
And the policy committee minutes as well, we'll address that a little bit later on.
Yeah, I think they're all pretty self-explanatory. I think the only thing I would say is we're meeting again.
Is it the 28th?
Yeah, later this month.
Great, all right. All right, moving on to consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? I believe we do have some at this point.
Yes, I had a question on the sports merger agreements. I was just wondering,
Hold on one second.
Yep.
Is the merger agreement under consent financial?
It is.
It is. Thank you. Just need to make sure I'm there.
No, I just, I was just wondering sort of how set in stone these mergers are, right? They're not legally binding or anything like that, and it allows, it's a wonderful opportunity allowing our students to play sports that we might not house here. But on the other end, when we do have some of these sports that we do have in the community that ebb and flow in terms of participation over time, is it possible to put a merger in place? Like right now, we're voting on the one for next year, but then if we end up having sort of a windfall of, not a windfall, but, extra students signing up, can we back out of them and be the lead school? We can.
Yeah, and actually that's our preferred way to facilitate it, is to make sure we have the merger in place so we know we can offer the opportunity. And great scenario, right? More Haldane students, for example, come out for a sport than maybe we had anticipated, and allows us to have our own team, in which case we notify the other school that we're not going to continue with the merger. And that's outlined in the rules and regulations for Section 1. So
It's interesting because the previous AD, having discussions about certain sports, it was more about sort of worrying about with some of the schools, the relationship between the schools, and we're not going to, it's been this way. This is what we're
yeah, I
going to
think
do.
we've balanced that. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interject. But I get that philosophy, and had conversations with some of our ADs over the years, because we had a few about it. But the one thing we want to make sure we don't lose sight of, especially when it comes to modified, it's important to make sure we have opportunity for our kids, but that doesn't. The numbers don't become so great, quite frankly, that now it dilutes the quality of the experience for all of the kids. And that's come up periodically with, in particular at the modified level, for various teams that we've had. And I can only speak for the last 5 years, over the course of the 5 years that I've been here, where, hey, very good intentions by wanting to keep everybody and have a big team. But then it just became a negative experience for the kids that are a part of the program, because our numbers were so big. Practices became unmanageable, and competition, which the focus of competition in modified should be different than varsity, but competition also wasn't as meaningful as and productive as it could be. Or should be, for students who are entering into that sport. So, and that's something we have to consider as we go through with the merger agreements, whether it be in the fall, winter, or spring. If we feel that by way of merging, now we're running the risk of it diluting the experience that our kids would be having, then we shouldn't continue with the merger.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, all those in favor?
Right.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Great, all right. Moving on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Dr. Benante?
Yeah, at this point, I'd ask Dr. Cation to come up and just speak to the creation of a temporary position of school counselor and our appointment in that area. These are items 2 and 3 under consent agenda personnel, and I'll leave the rest to Regina.
Okay, thank you. Regina Cation, Director of Pupil Personnel Services for Haldane. Thank you, President McNall, and trustees, and Dr. Benante. So really, this idea to create this position came about through sort of a confluence of events, but in essence, it was in response to some need that we saw that our students were having, particularly across the middle school and the high school. I don't think it's a secret. It's certainly not unique to Haldane, but we have quite a few students currently that are really kind of struggling with some anxiety, with some, depressive symptoms, not necessarily full-blown diagnoses, but definitely an increase in the need for mental health support. And so, that was the backdrop. We also were noticing that some of our mental health providers that are already here were often pulled into sort of almost like triage situations where they were having to kind of address the most the urgent situation, and some of that was leading to us not maybe being able to spend as much time as we would like developing protective measures and fostering coping skills and some things like that. So that was happening. We also had a school counselor go out on maternity leave. We had a leave replacement come in who was actually really a great team player and definitely an asset. And we started to kind of look at how could we continue to not just manage some of the children that were in crisis, but also support some of the children that, and hopefully prevent some more crises. We were also working and really proactively working to increase our collaboration with Putnam County, as well as the hub. And so we were having multiple meetings with some of our resources in the community to say, how can we work together to support some of these mental health needs? And so the Putnam County was able to tell us about a grant that's federally funded. Also, one of those grants where you have to jump through a few hoops, but this particular grant was for to support the mental health needs of children who not just got impacted by COVID, but actually had COVID. So we had to kind of send out a survey, you probably saw it, and we had to come up with at least a certain, critical mass of children that had COVID, and we were able to apply for the grant, and we were able to get it through, with the help of the county. So this grant will run through the end of June and has enabled us to set up a position which we decided could be this counselor position. And the idea is that that role could be used to do some of that proactive work. So for example, we were looking to do more work on preventing substance abuse. Vaping is an issue that's out in the wider community. So that would be an example where now with somebody that has substance abuse experience in the certificate can work with middle school students on, making some healthy decisions and things like that. And so we're really excited about this. It's actually a tremendous opportunity. It should be at absolutely no cost to the district. It will come to an end in June. But that's how we really kind of came about creating the position. And the principals, Ms. Sniffen and Dr. Silke, were very instrumental in kind of helping identify the exact needs in the building. And we're going to be working very closely with, I think it's in the same agenda, but with Ms. Amato on how we can best use her services to support the students. Any questions about it?
No, that's great. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
really excited about it.
That's great.
So, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cation. All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No? All right, moving on to new business. Ms. Shields?
Okay. CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendation of the Committee on Special Education and the Committee on Preschool Special Education as presented below. Be it further resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby ratifies the attached agreement with the Fox Lane High School Hillside Program for the remainder of the 22-23 school year, signed by the Board President on behalf of the district.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion or anything about this that we need? No? Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? All right, next is the 2023-2024 calendar for review. We're going to look to adopt this March 7th, 2023 at the meeting. This is just anything to highlight in the calendar as we look forward?
Yeah, the probably most significant change is that the calendar includes a full week for students to be off in February. which has been something that has come up in previous years for discussion. It is reflected in the BOCES draft calendar. Or actually, BOCES has adopted their calendar now, so the BOCES calendar. So that's always been a bit of a sore spot where our calendar doesn't sync up with BOCES completely, which means that our students who are assigned to Tech Center in particular on those days don't have Tech Center to go to. So we saw, and there was always ways to approach this, but through our calendar committee, which is comprised of members of our teaching unit, as well as our CSEA, their, say, consensus, yeah, I'll say consensus, on moving towards sacrificing, if you will, or moving away from some days that we've traditionally used as holidays, and including a full week off so that we could align with BOCES at that point. So that is reflected in this draft calendar here. Our process is to introduce it at the board meeting, which we're doing tonight. Also notify the community that it has been presented to the board. That way, if any community members have questions or feel the need to comment on it or have the desire to comment on it before the board formally acts on it, they can do so over the course of the next month, approximately.
And a majority of these days that we're taking off are taken from other sort of winter holidays.
So
and it's
in
not
particular,
pushing the,
yes,
pushing
correct.
the end of, yeah.
So, and the end of the year is usually defined by the last day that Regents exams are administered or the rating day that's defined. So that's a pretty firm last day point. The beginning of the year, we have some flexibility with. Our teachers unit has always been good and open to considering coming in before Labor Day, even if it's for the superintendent's conference day, which is what's reflected here. That's great. Not every, that doesn't exist necessarily in every district. Sometimes there's contract language that interferes with that. That's not the case here. You'll note in the past, Memorial Day has been a day that we've had an extended recess. We typically will do the Thursday, Friday before, and then the Monday. This calendar does not reflect the Thursday and the Friday before. It just reflects Memorial Day, the Monday. So those 2 days, think of it, have now gone to that midwinter recess point, and then we had another day somewhere else that we were able to grab.
The Monday after Easter.
Yes, the Monday after Easter, which on this calendar is Easter is
Maybe not even spring break.
Easter's actually at the beginning of that spring break.
Okay.
Great. Right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If I had a child in school, I'd be happy with this calendar.
You happy with it?
Yes, I would.
It's
Why?
nice.
I'm just curious.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's I really understand the rationale for starting before Labor Day. I have always really understood it. It's also kind of nice to not start before Labor Day. I think the February holiday is nice, but I actually, anyway, there's lots of rationales for having different calendars. I think this one looks good.
As a parent, being able to have Labor Day weekend, I think is important with your kids.
Yeah.
And to to have that, have school start after that is a positive thing, just from a parent perspective. And that week in February, as a parent, now you get more times with your kids.
And pulling those days into one
positive
week,
days.
Sometimes it's hard to it's hard to get a rhythm when you have 2 days off here, 2 days off here, 2 days off here too. So
For sure.
I feel like that's
Well,
nice.
and there was a point where the February holiday just felt redundant because we're having so many snow days. Well,
Doesn't
snow
seem
days,
to be the case
but it's
anymore.
not the case as much now.
Remember winter?
Yeah, I do.
used to
Yeah,
love
not
winter.
this year. But we also have the issue now where there's just fewer snow days, right? Because with the possibility of remote instruction, right?
Correct.
It's less likely that kids are going to be out, day after day in January and February.
And that definitely factored into our discussion around the option and the availability to shift to a remote option in the event that you do have a significant number of weather-related days. So that certainly helped the discussion. Thanks.
All right. Moving on to policy review, first readings. Here we have, I think it's 3420. This is the DASA, I believe, Dignity for All Students, as well as the non-discrimination and anti-harassment in the district.
And in particular, I spoke to this at the last meeting
Right.
after some public events. Dr. Benante, I thought, really very proactively thought about the possibility of including language about parent notification under
Right.
certain events. And so he worked with the district's council and
Great.
ran it by via email, the policy committee. And so that's what these are.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. And now moving on to policy review, first reading, and adoption. Ms. Shields.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby waives the second reading and adopts the following Haldane Central School District policy as attached. 3510, emergency school closings.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right.
And just really briefly, I think this is where we had noticed, I don't know, Megan, someone noticed that the policy stated some pretty outdated ways in which the district was notifying communities. And I hearkened back to those days, like lying in bed, listening to WHUD, like waiting to hear. But that no one does that anymore. So it's just really this minor change to reflect the updated practice.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Great. And now we're going on to we're going to rescind the policy, correct? Ms. Shields?
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, the Board of Education hereby rescinds the following Haldane Central School District policy attached. 5150, contingency budget.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
All right. This is the contingency budget. It's been absorbed into another policy and it's redundant, right? Great. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Great. This is the second opportunity for communication from the public. Mr. Asher has said everything he has to say for today, so we'll move on from that to our board reflections. Anyone have anything you want to share? No?
I had a story that's sort of just continuing on the subject of the Battle of the Tunnel. We have a Haldane alum and a current Haldane parent, elementary parent, Matt Steltz. He is a teacher at Beacon and a coach as well. And he showed up to the girls' Battle of the Tunnel in Beacon. And I just thought it was a really good demonstration of the spirit. He sat with his students for the first half, and then he came over and he sat with his Haldane, family for the second half. And it was just, it was nice to see the supportive sort of, arena around that, if you will. So that was fun to see.
And I believe we have a birthday in the room. Is that correct? All right. It's not your birthday this time. I believe it's Ms. Shields'
We're
birthday.
going to try to have a meeting on everyone's birthday.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And I think someone is over there applauding for your birthday that might be related to you. All right, Dr. Benante.
Sean, you have to sing now.
What's that?
If there's one thing Megan would want for her birthday, it's for us not to sing.
I will decline, and Dr.
I have no
Benante.
further comments.
No further comments? Great, then I would like to make a motion to adjourn. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No. Great. Any opposed? No. Bye, John. It's great to see you. I hope that's the hotel background and not whatever is actually behind you. Okay, good.